If you found out that a conservative, like right-wing mega donor had written a check for $1,000 to a Supreme Court justice, just given him $1,000, you'd probably be worried that that might represent a bribe. What if you found out he'd handed over $133,000? Well, we've got something kind of like that on our hands with conservative billionaire donor Harlan Crow, who, it was just revealed by follow-up research by ProPublica to their amazing revelation of this long-standing relationship between Clarence Thomas and Harlan Crow, where he had been taking him around the world on these amazing vacations. Turns out now that back in 2014, Harlan Crow bought 3 properties belonging to Clarence Thomas and his family that Thomas just forgot to ever mention in the federal disclosure forms that one might have expected, certainly the law expected. So this marks the first known instance of money directly flowing from the donor to Clarence Thomas. I mean, you've had something like that in the past, not just with the trips, but with the incredibly lavish gifts. But for some reason, this is worse. Crow apparently bought 3 properties. Together they cost $133,363 from their 3 co-owners, which include Clarence Thomas, his mother, and the family of Thomas's late brother. This is according to a state tax document and a deed dated October 15th, 2014. Crow now owned the house where the justice's elderly mother was living. And what's interesting is that Thomas did not disclose the sale, which is apparently unlawful. But in response to this, he also doesn't have anything to say. Just a man of few words when it comes to responding to this sort of journalism, as well as complying with his legal requirements. But while he didn't have much to say, Harlan Crow actually did. He said, "My intention is to one day create a public museum at the Thomas house, dedicated to telling the story of our nation's second Black Supreme Court justice. I approached the Thomas family about my desire to maintain this historic site so future generations could learn about the inspiring life of one of our greatest Americans." Now, Crow's statement did not address why he also bought 2 vacant lots from Thomas down the street that did not represent a historic place that he grew up as a young tyke. It was just property that you could buy and thus give a bunch of money to the other guy. He didn't talk about that. He did write that the other lots were later sold to a vetted builder who was committed to improving the quality of the neighborhood and preserving its historical integrity. Of course, he built different buildings on it, so it's not preserving history, it's new development, but come up with whatever facade you're going to. Now, I also want you to bear in mind that that $133,000, while it might not seem like a lot of money in some real estate markets right now, it does potentially represent a massive overpayment for that particular property. Crow bought several other properties on that same street, paid significantly less than the one with his deal with the Thomases. In 2013, just the prior year, he bought a pair of properties on the same block, a vacant lot and a small house, for a total of $40,000. So again, look, houses can vary, but 2 properties, including a house, $40,000. Clarence Thomas's house, $133,000. Seems pretty suspicious, and it actually gets even more suspicious, but I want to give both of you a chance to weigh in.
So John, you're right to begin the story with, did they pay more than market price? And it appears that they did. Okay, so that's already a giant problem. But there are many others. So number one, this funnels money directly into Clarence Thomas's pocket. This is not, hey, I have a rich friend, we went on vacation together, he paid for it. Okay, that's already a problem because you didn't disclose it, and this wasn't a little vacation. These were vacations that are worth $500,000. They were incredible vacations, but at least that didn't go directly into your pocket. This did, okay? Third problem. Apparently, as far as we can tell, Clarence Thomas's mother didn't pay any rent. Wait a minute, she doesn't own the house. Harlan Crow owns the house. Why is she not paying any rent? That's just a favor to Clarence Thomas. Again, more money in the Thomas family pocket, now directly being given by this person who has a vested interest in Supreme Court decisions, as a person who's involved in corporations and businesses, etc., that is going to affect. Supreme Court decisions could affect billions of dollars for him. So for him to spend $133,000, $40,000, etc., these are small bribes to pay. Okay, but we're not done. There's still more. They did over $30,000 in renovations to her house. She didn't pay for any of it. There were houses next to hers that were creating issues for her. They're making too much noise in decrepit situation, too much parties. Harlan Crow happens to buy those houses, and then he clears them out, and he happens to sell a new house there to a police officer who's going to keep this place safe. Man, this is a giant number of favors, financial favors to a Supreme Court justice. Clarence Thomas knows it's wrong, never reports any of it. So now, if we don't do something about this, whether it's Chief Justice Roberts, and ultimate authority is with Congress, etc. Well, we're just gonna say now bribery of the Supreme Court is legal, and that is a deeply troubling precedent.
Yeah, that's my takeaway as well, Cenk. It's what comes of this? This is a brazenly corrupt act and pattern of behavior for 20 years. And think about that time frame too. They became friends. Like Clarence Thomas tried to couch this in, oh, this is a close personal friendship. And he reiterated that point multiple times in his statement. Well, that friendship began after he became a Supreme Court justice. So Harlan Crow wasn't there from the beginning. It's not like they were childhood friends. He wanted to be his friend because he's a Supreme Court justice. I don't know if Thomas is just going to ignore that point or acknowledges it, but that's why he wants to be his friend. It's not because of his personality, because by all accounts, Clarence Thomas doesn't have much of a personality. But if he can do this without any repercussions, without any oversight from Congress, without any punishment whatsoever, what's the point? What is the point of our legal system, of the Supreme Court, of any attempts at implementing ethical guidelines or boundaries for public figures and their behavior? What's the point? What are we doing? Because he's not the only person who has behaved in a corrupt manner in the past several years, or past few decades. And time again, we see the more powerful and wealthy and connected elite get away with this kind of stuff, but average working people are locked up for years, especially if they're black, for petty crimes. It's a two-tier justice system, and unfortunately, one of the people who are in a position for the rest of their life to oversee that justice system and that legal system isn't held to the same standard.
Yeah, like we've obviously, here at TYT, we've been talking about political corruption for a long time, Wolfpack and all that. We already thought that we had enough issues, not just with campaign donations to elected officials at a variety of levels, but we were already worried about all of the different pressures that would influence a Supreme Court justice due to the way that the nominating process is run, combined with the fact that they have lifetime appointments. They're inclined to take certain sorts of positions so that they can get that job. They can get any of these jobs at different levels of the federal judiciary. But I guess I was still kind of naive because I imagined that for the most part, then that's it. Which is why sometimes you get justices that end up issuing rulings that are different than you might predict. There have been some, including Roberts in some cases, who didn't necessarily end up being the justice you thought that they would be. But no, now it's just, I guess it's open season. I guess if Roberts doesn't do anything, if Congress doesn't do anything, then I don't know, why doesn't George Soros just cut a check to Sotomayor for $250,000? I mean, that's fine. He's just trying to preserve the legacy of blah, blah, blah. We can come up with some sort of stupid cover story, and what's the difference? It's not against the law. There's apparently no laws. You can shower them with expensive gifts and expensive trips, and you can, buy their used clothes for 1,000 times market value. You can just transfer money to them, and then they can rule in your favor. And I guess we as regular people have no recourse. I mean, this one is, at least from what we can tell, definitely against the law. All of his other stuff seems wildly unethical. I think a regular person would believe that they're getting away with murder, but the system has been set up to advantage people like this so that they can't easily be caught. In this case, there is a federal disclosure law that was passed after Watergate that requires justices and other officials to disclose the details of most real estate sales over $1,000. This was way over that. He didn't do that. He didn't report that he had deals with Harlan Crow. He obviously was avoiding reporting it because it looks so terrible. And 4 ethics law experts told ProPublica that he needed to report this. Given the role that Crow has played in subsidizing the lifestyle Thomas is his wife, you have to wonder if this was an effort to put cash in their pockets. I don't have to wonder about that. I already know that. I mean, look, he handed over $500,000 to Ginny Thomas's PAC. It is ridiculous what they can get away with. So the question now is, what can be done? Who has any chance of actually trying to do something? AOC had been talking about trying to impeach Clarence Thomas after the original reporting. So what, if anything, happens now?
I want to address two things you said, John. First, about the George Soros comment. One of our members said something very similar right before you said. Asina Hogaboom wrote in, if George Soros bought AOC a piece of key lime pie, these cucks would lose their minds. Okay, that is about right. I love our members, tyt.com/join to become a member, or hit the join button below the video on YouTube. All right, anyway, on to the most serious point, which is what do we do about it? Well, you know they're not going to impeach Clarence Thomas. The Democrats don't have the stones for it. The Republicans would lose their minds. They'd say defund the FBI, the Congress. Wait, no, we're in Congress. Don't defund that, but defund something, right? They would just absolutely lose it. There's no way it's going to happen. So get a load of this. Well, I don't know if it's an irony or just like a vicious cycle of corruption that has happened. So in my book, I explain how corruption started with the Supreme Court. We never voted on it. Never once did the American people in any way, shape, or form say that private money should be able to go to politicians. That was an anathema to the founding fathers. It's a ridiculous idea. The Supreme Court, by the way, with literally crooked justices, decided, yeah, we're going to allow corruption. We're going to allow open and brazen bribery of politicians that go to Congress and the presidency, right? Now, by letting Clarence Thomas get away with this, which is almost certainly what's going to happen, the Congress will return the favor to the Supreme Court and say, oh, you can take bribes too. So now they're all going to take bribes. And this is just a free for all. We don't have a democracy anymore. It's an auction, a total open auction where they buy every part of our government freely and rub it in our face. And so, look, I mentioned my book there. Here, oh, I got a fake version of the book right here. So this is what it's gonna look like when it comes out. Anyway, the inside's not the real book. We just finished it today, literally today. Anyway, you can pre-order at tyt.com/justice. But the essence of the book, the very core of it, chapter 4, is exactly how the Supreme Court stole our democracy. Now Congress is going to finish the job by letting the Supreme Court take endless bribes if they let Clarence Thomas get away with this.
Yeah, I go back to my point earlier. I'm kind of cynical on any potential outcomes, even though this seems so clear cut. Notice John laid out, we have a very clear transfer of money from one guy to a justice through this real estate sale. That it just seems so blatant and so easy. This is a slam dunk case, but because of partisan gridlock in DC, nothing's probably going to happen. But the political will is there, right? Over 1.2 million people have signed their name at moveon.org/Thomas to call on Congress to impeach Clarence Thomas. And acknowledge that's great. We see this groundswell of support. People want that. It's the right thing to do. But when you have a Congress who's just filled with obstructionist Republicans, what's going to happen? I try to rein in my cynicism on this, but it's only going to get worse. If this is okay, then something slightly more egregious is going to be okay, and we just keep going until they're just all bought and sold. It's just ridiculous.
Well, I'll end the story on a fun note here. Going back to our members, who I love. I think they're so smart and funny. Dragon from the Boogie Down writes in to Jordan's earlier point about Clarence Thomas's personality. Clarence Thomas has the personality of a Walmart parking lot. And that dynamic character is going to destroy our Congress and our Supreme Court at the same time. And probably everyone in Washington is going to let him get away with it.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.